Today we're going to talk about 6 lessons I learned from the Psych ward. So leave your 5-star review if this has been helpful to you and pass it on to a friend. Also, for more information, go to livebrighter.info. So there were 6 main things I learned from being in the Psych ward twice. First, I want to give you a little bit of history. So I was married for 22 years. 5 years into the marriage, I tried to get away. I had just had a baby, had undiagnosed Hashimoto's and some hyperthyroidism. Tried to get away, ended up getting in a psych ward because I ended up flooding my aunt's basement when she colluded with my husband at the time to take our daughter. And so by doing that in the state that I was in, I got put into the psych ward. And so that was my first time, and that came out with a bipolar diagnosis. And then about, I don't even know exactly how many years. Basically, I had gotten off medications because I didn't fit an actual bipolar person in the sense of, highs and lows regularly, even on medication. So my psychiatrist weaned me off, and then again, another 5-year cycle of even more destructive relationship. And then I stopped sleeping again, which was what happened the first time, is I was so stressed out that I stopped sleeping. So I had an agreement with my husband at the time that if I ever had any mental challenges, that I would immediately get on medication. And being sensitive to medication, I needed to go to the psych ward and try a few out. And just so you know, if you've been in a psych ward, you probably prefer the term behavioral health unit because, it may seem like demeaning to say, the psych ward. But those were the 2 times that I was in there. And then basically I learned from that, I wasn't bipolar and I was in a very destructive relationship and, started to change my life and don't have bipolar and just I'm doing really well. So that's the whole situation. And I will always say that if you're ever getting on off medication, or if that's something that interests you, please do that with your doctor. And do it slowly. So that is my advice for you. I would never want to say, and by the way, you don't have bipolar, you don't have this. It's really something that, you and yourself and your specialist all work together on, and you work towards it. I think one of the big things, and so this is number 1. The 5 things or the 6 things I have learned. Number 1 is I am not the current problem. I am not my diagnosis. Number 2 is, and I'm going to go through each of these in more depth. Number 2 is I am not stuck. I'm never stuck. Number 3 is to listen to my body and emotions. Number 4, in order to change, I had to do things differently. And number 5, my job was to take care of me. And number 6 was God will never leave me or forsake me. So we're going to go through each of those. So the first one being I am not my diagnosis. I think it's very hard in our Western civilization when we get like a bipolar or a depressive diagnosis or something like that, because it almost feels like a stamp on your forehead that that's something you're gonna have to deal with the rest of your life. Unfortunately, though, Western medicine is very specialized and not holistic, and they don't take into account like your circumstances to a degree and to what's going on and how your body is doing, because you can have total mental health issues and it can be completely from your physical body at the time, and you can have total mental health issues and be in a very destructive environment and that have a lot more to do with it, which was my case. But it's very actually much more holistic, and it's not just you've got this disease and that's the way it is and you're stuck with it, because there is a lot looking at that holistic approach that can be done. And so first of all, just with anything though, even because basically I would say I had 2 mental breakdowns. That's how I look at it, or mentally challenging times. That's how I label it now. But in the time, it feels like that is your life. That will always be your life. That is how will always be viewed. And it is a circumstance at the time, and it sucks. Whatever you're going through, during the time that I went through my challenges, and honestly, we'll always go through challenges, but those would be really low challenges in my life, really challenging challenges. And, but, we're not defined by those. That's just where things are at. We're not defined by a divorce, a death, We're not defined by, that's where things are at right at that moment. And it's terrible. And that is going to change. So that's something to always think about. So that's something, is that I am not my current problems and I am not my diagnosis. And I think that's super powerful to know that. And there's a lot that can be done, whatever you are in a current problem or a current diagnosis. Second lesson is I am never stuck. And I think that was part of my challenge, to be honest, and why I ended up in the situation of 2 psych ward visits, is I felt very stuck. I felt stuck by my beliefs. My belief was like I had to stay married, even though it was very destructive to me, constantly being, criticized, changed, ignored, for, leaving things out like pencils and pieces of paper and things like that. And, that wouldn't have been destructive to another person possibly, but it was very destructive to me. And because of my, religious beliefs of, you gotta, be married and stay married and that's what you gotta do. That stuckness was really destructive to me, feeling stuck. And the truth is, we're never stuck, ever. There's always choices. I think the most important thing is whenever we feel stuck, or if we ever find ourselves saying, gosh, I'm feeling very stuck, is really to honestly look at the circumstances and the reality and know that there are choices. And for me, I think I was having troubles honestly looking at, the reality and just saying, this is terrible for me. This is very destructive. This is not getting better. This is continually going worse and going through cycles. And I had a really hard time, just seeing reality for what it was and not sugarcoating it, in the sense of always focusing on the good and, oh, he's a good provider, he's a Christian man, we have we have wonderful children, and things like that. But I was doing that and not looking at really how it was affecting me and being honest about it. So the truth is, we're never stuck. And I realize that now. I'm never stuck. I may feel stuck, and as soon as I think, gosh, I'm feeling stuck, I just say, no, I'm not stuck. I have choices. What are my choices? And so that's how I look at it now. Are you finding yourself constantly pouring your energy into relationships, leaving you drained and unfulfilled? Do you feel like you're going through the motions of life and have somehow lost yourself? The Unravel Notebook offers a transformative journey to break free from those exhausting patterns. The guided prompts are designed to reconnect you with your inner self, strengthen your relationship with God, and foster healthier connections with others. The Unravel Notebook will help you identify and overcome old patterns, paving the way to a brighter, more intimate life. The Unravel Notebook journey for me, I took as an overly kind person in a destructive relationship for 22 years and transformed me into a now thriving business owner with a fabulous marriage. Start your journey to live brighter today. Order the Unravel Notebook on Amazon. The third one, and this is a huge one for me, is to listen to my body and emotions. I would say for most of my life, I was like, okay, I can get through this, I can do this, and was just cognitively, pushing myself through it, but physically declining, with allergies and just, autoimmune disease and tumor in my thyroid, just chronically struggling and just emotionally pushing it down and not really dealing with it. So what I realized is how important it is, especially for people like me. I would say I'm probably one of those empathic people that can just feel people's feelings and just are more sensitive maybe to their environment, whereas other people may not be. But for me, I actually feel things in my body if it's like a destructive environment or a scenario. I really feel it in my body a lot of times before I'm able to understand it in my mind. And, learning to know that we have intuition and we have the Holy Spirit in us, that was something that I kind of just pushed aside and was all about rationalizing it. And that really got in the way, just me rationalizing things. So really listening to my body and emotions. I would say a circumstance that happened just recently, just a reminder, is there is some things, to put in context, I'm now remarried to just a wonderful guy, and Michael, and it's been fabulous. You may have seen him on a previous episode where we talked about his relationship he had been in previously and how that was destructive to him. And it's been wonderful. I've talked about him a lot and how, I really value our relationship. Well, there are a couple little things, kind of that were bothering me. And I thought, oh, these are little, these shouldn't be bothering me. But I noticed I was getting more and more tense and I was getting like sharp pains. I should know sharp pains in my shoulder and in my back are kind of signaling to me that I'm not being authentic with who I am. And I just had a hard time just speaking my truth because, he's going, through some changes in his life. And I was just like, I don't really want to burden him and it's okay. But then I was getting more physical pain in my shoulder and my neck and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not being honest about who I am and what's important to me, even if it's the little stuff. And, thankfully we have a very emotionally safe relationship where we can express that. But I was, again, using my brain to be like, oh, he's going through a hard time, changes and stuff like that. I shouldn't bring it up right now. Anyways, that didn't work so well because I started getting in pain and then it came out probably in a way that wasn't as effective as it could have been. And so just to, now I'm just like, oh, my body is telling me that I need to take care of this and I need to address this. So for me, listening to my body and my emotions are super important. I think for a lot of times most of my life, I thought emotions were kind of like there's good emotions and there's bad emotions. And that you had to avoid those bad emotions and anger was a sin. The truth is, God is in the scope of all emotions. Like he had anger, he had sadness, disappointment, happiness, joy. So God is an example of all emotions and he's perfect. So obviously emotions are not bad or good. They're just information. There's vibrations in our body and we really need to listen to them. So now I see emotions as information. And rather than judging myself like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you're feeling that way or whatever, just like, okay, you're feeling that way. Let's just feel the emotion. Where is it at in your body? What does it look like? What is it saying to me? Has a boundary been crossed? Or am I depleted and I need to take care of myself? Is that what this emotion is saying? So I really just listen to the emotion, like process it, feel it in my body, and ask it what it wants to tell me. So it's a completely different way of how I looked at emotions previously. So yes, number 3, listening to my body and emotions. Number 4, to change, I actually had to do things differently. I know that seems like, oh, that's kind of a no-da, but that is the truth. Like if I want change, I have to do things differently. And it's funny because when I was in the psych ward the second time, getting back on medication, I realized the definition of crazy is to do the same thing and expect a different result. And so it wasn't the crazy part that I was mentally struggling because, the circumstance that caused me to lose sleep and caused me to go there was actually pretty terrible for for me. It was that I needed to not expect things to be different because there was a regular pattern within that marriage that if I did something wrong that I would be ignored and then I would be punished and I would be iced out, and that was a regular pattern. So I had to really realize that I needed to do things differently and that I was a lot of the problem because I was allowing it. And so if I just realized I had to change. So I had to change both, like my mind was a big deal, but also just like body and my spirit and my beliefs. So I had to kind of really look at all of those things. And that's why I made the Unravel notebook, because that was like the process I used to kind of unravel all of that and just to change to get to a healthier version and a sustainable version and a happy version of myself. And a version that, please God, because I'm using my gifts and who I am in a way that's authentic and I'm loving people in an authentic way and not in a way that was just of what I needed to do and what I had to do to be a good Christian. It's coming from my heart and from who I am. So getting out of this, anytime you have like a mental or, physical or death of anything big, it is a very big challenge on your body. So the first change I had to make was getting my body healthy again. So that meant like looking at, nutrition, sleep, health. And for me, it was just about because I had gotten on lithium the second time in the psych ward, which was fabulous because it helped me sleep. And that was like the defining factor for me when I got like so stressed out about my marriage is I'd stop sleeping. And so that was fabulous, but also, gosh, made me so tired and my body so tired from just the whole thing. And so I had to constantly be telling myself, okay, what would a healthy person do? Because honestly, I wasn't living a healthy life because I found myself in a psych ward and that wasn't good. So that meant for me, like going on, pushing myself just to get fresh air, to start to create a space for myself of opening my mind, especially being like, okay, I'm not seeing this circumstance in a way that is correct, and I need to open my mind to whatever God wants to give me and whoever He wants to lead to give me information about what's going on because I obviously don't understand it, and this is obviously not working. And one of the first things He gave me was a book by Napoleon Hill. And I think it's called Devil the Adversary or something like that. And I might be getting that wrong. But it was all about fear and basically how Satan uses fear to control. And as I looked at my life, I was chronically in fear. And I didn't even know it. I was chronically on eggshells, walking on eggshells. And that is not healthy or good. And so that book pointed out the first thing. And then it was just a cascade of being like, yeah, that's not, you need to change your brain about this and thoughts about this and beliefs about that. And that basically gave me the ability at that time to finally confront my husband and say, okay, now I understand. You're passive aggressive and, you stonewall me for 6 days and that doesn't work for me. It's very destructive and I'm not going to allow it anymore. And basically I said, if you don't change, I'm going to have to divorce you. So that was 2 years before we actually divorced. But I didn't even understand all of that. So really opening my brain and mind. So change. That was the fourth thing that I learned from being in the psych ward is that if I'm going to have a different result, then I had to change and I had to take responsibility for that. I am so tired of attracting selfish, narcissistic relationships. It's exhausting. Even in my workplace, I find that people want to take advantage of my time and energy, and I don't even get it. And friendships are a little bit that way too. What? What are you staring at? Do I have a zit on my face? What? I have a bullseye on my forehead? You mean I'm part of the problem and I'm attracting this myself? That's terrible. If you would like to sign up for the free Kind Girl Bullseye quiz, click the link. And you'll find out how big your bullseye is for attracting those kind of relationships and how to make it smaller. And that brings me to number 5, that it is my job to take care of myself. And that means that I have to take care of my body, soul, mind, and spirit. And I used to think of that as, oh my goodness, that's so selfish. We're supposed to serve others. It's all about serving others. But as I looked at the Bible, it actually doesn't say that. It says we're supposed to love others as we love ourselves. So I really think, love God fully with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but then to love ourselves. And, I really had to dive into, okay, well, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts. What does that mean to love ourselves? That means we are taking care of ourselves. We're respecting ourselves, our thoughts and our feelings. We are making room for ourselves in the world. And we are speaking kindly to ourselves. And that's a big thing right there. It's just like speaking kindly, encouraging. And all of those things. And that was what my first responsibility in the world is to take care of myself. And that means I had to advocate for myself. Like I said previously, I had to finally say, yeah, I can't do this, and this is going to be the result. And that's a big deal, to learn to advocate for yourself. I think we naturally want our knight in shining armor to, save the day or someone else to take care of us. But we have to take care of ourselves, and that's actually our responsibility and our job. And I had to take responsibility also for where I was at in my life. That where I was at was because of my choices and my decisions, and I basically chose, not the victim. Yeah, there were things that happened. I'm not okay with it, but I still have 100% responsibility of learning from it, growing from it, choosing a different path, and rewriting that story. So really just taking care of myself and 100% ownership. And that is a big deal. And that's something that I still really subscribe to, to do that. That's super important. And the 6th lesson that I learned from my 2 psych ward experiences is that God will never leave you or forsake you. First, I want to be clear. I felt absolutely left and forsaken during that time. I felt like, God, I've done everything right. I've done what you've asked. I'm, loving and serving and sacrificing. And I am, and I was super angry at God. And I'm like, I don't understand, da 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 da. So after I got through the emotion of feeling like rejected and dejected by God, I really asked him, and I would encourage you guys to do this too. I asked him, like, okay, I felt like you weren't there for me in the darkest day, and I had a very specific time in the psych ward that just was very, very dark. As I mentioned, there was some abuse that went on in my first psych ward experience. It was very challenging. And so I just had to ask God, like, in that, experience, that vision I have, where were you? And rather like, where were you? Da, 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 da. It's like, no, from the Bible, it says you were there. You never leave me or forsake you. So you were there. Where were you? And he showed me. He's like, I was actually right there. And he was crying and he was sad. And he was there. But, he also allows choices and free will. And he allows certain things to play out that in the end are for good. And during the time, they suck and I don't understand him. And sometimes I may never. But he was there and he did care about what I was going through and my thoughts and my feelings and the circumstances. And he had great compassion on that. And I would really encourage, like, any of you, if you've gone through a trauma, whether it's like big tree trauma, a rape, just abandoned, whatever it is, or even small t traumas, bullying, regular, my biggest challenge were the small t traumas, the constantly being criticized and not enough. And really ask God, ask Jesus. I asked Jesus because I think of, him in the visual form. Where were you and what were you doing? Like, what, and then ask to see that. And I think he will honor that request because he says he will never leave you and forsake you. So he was there and he's very compassionate and he'd like to show you. But he always is a person where he wants you to ask. He's not going to be like, and this is where I was and booming and loud and da 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 da. So I encourage you to ask. So that was my 6th lesson, is that God doesn't leave us or forsake us. And there are hard things that happen in life. I feel like, especially in like the Christian, it's supposed to be like rainbows and butterflies and joy and peace all the time. But life is really 50-50. I mean, there's just bad stuff and good stuff, and there's challenging things that happen. And we do have the promise that God will never leave us or forsake us, and that we can get through us. We're very resilient, much more resilient than we even know. So those, again, were the 6 lessons I learned from my psych ward experience. That, number 1, I am not my diagnosis and I'm not my current problem. Number 2, I am never stuck. Number 3, to listen to my body and my emotions. Number 4, if I want things different, they need to change, and I'm responsible for that. Number 5, it is my job to take care of me. And number 6, God will never leave me or forsake me. So I encourage you to go back to some of your challenging times and stories and rewrite that story and take out the lessons and see how you can look at it differently, and that can really help. I believe in you. Grow 1% a day and live brighter.